You're listening to Let's Get It On with Big John McCarthy and Sean Wheelock.
Big John McCarthy has witnessed the best that the UFC had to offer.
That is it! Game, set, match! We have a new champion!
Your backstage pass to the world of mixed martial arts and combat sports. Only on the Ignotainment Media Network.
Let's get it on!
Hey everyone, welcome to Let's Get It On with Big John McCarthy and me, Sean Wheelock. On site from the 2015 ABC convention in San Diego, California. Every week on this podcast, John and I give you an inside look at MMA and combat sports, always separating fact from fiction. On this week's program, we'll be joined here in San Diego by two prominent people in the combat sports industry, Mike Mazzulli, the newly elected president of the ABC in his first interview since gaining the office, and by Jeff Novitzky, the UFC's vice president of athlete and health performance, who will discuss the promotion's drug testing partnership with the U.S. Anti-Doping Agency. Plus, as we do on every episode of Let's Get It On, John will answer your questions. So ask away via email, info@letsgetitonpodcast.com. That's info@letsgetitonpodcast.com. Remember that you can download and subscribe to our podcast on the iTunes Store. For Android, download the Stitcher app and subscribe. And you can go straight to our website, letsgetitonpodcast.com. Well, John, with virtually no media or public awareness, this has really been a huge week here at the 2015 ABC convention.
It's been a good week because there's been a lot of change, and you know, sometimes we always talk about change as people are worried about change, but change is good, and I think the change that's happened here with the ABC is you got new blood. You know, the ABC is really the agency that the federal government put together to cover combat sports, but it was really put together for boxing. And that's what it was, really there in the beginning for. And mixed martial arts and other, forms of combat like kickboxing or Muay Thai have been kind of pushed into it. And I don't think, they've ever really been able to figure out how to adapt things, the right way or how to make it to where it's a smooth, transition. You just look at the name, Association of Boxing Commissions. It says nothing else about, the other sports there. So I think with this new administration, if you want to call it that, with Mike Mazzulli just being, voted in as the new president, you've got, Lydia Robertson being the treasurer, and you got Brian Dunn being there.
A former pro MMA fighter.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing is you've got, we now have people that are sitting in positions. Brian Dunn had about 70, MMA fights. So this is a guy that understands MMA, and so that's going to help us. It's going to help in hopefully getting some things, brought about, changed, all these things that are out there. I'd love to see some of these rules changed. And when we have someone like Brian who has been part of it, who actually fought when there was no rules at one time, so he knows what that's like, and he knows where the rules are now. He's been a, executive officer in Nebraska for about 5 years. So it's going to be interesting to see how this administration goes about trying to make changes quicker and more efficiently than the prior one.
Well, on Tuesday here in San Diego, Mike Mazzulli was elected as the new president of the ABC. Mazzulli has gained a reputation as one of the absolute best regulators in all of MMA, boxing, and combat sports through his work as the head of the Mohegan Commission in Connecticut. Just hours after taking office, Big John and I spoke exclusively with Mike Mazzulli, and I began by asking him what he sees as his mandate as president of the ABC.
I must admit, the first thing is to unify the association. We need to lead combative sports industry and set precedents and how we regulate all combative sports throughout the country.
Well, first I want to tell you congratulations. You're the first new president of the ABC in 14 years, so it's going to be a nice new change. Tim Luckenoff did a nice job with the ABC, but what I really want to know is what do you think are the main things that you want to try to bring about now that you're in charge? Is there anything out there within the worlds of boxing or MMA that you say, this is something I think needs to be looked at, this is something I think needs to be possibly changed, and how are you going to go about doing that?
As you know, the ABC, I look out for the best interest of the fighters. And that doesn't just include the health and safety. It also includes the scoring. I think we really need to address the scores of boxing, MMA, judges and referees. Inspectors. I think, the front line is the inspector. You look at the HBO documentary Assault in the Ring, and the bottom line is, an inspector does everything for the safety of the fighter. And I think I want to do some training, get some certifications for we do. Let me rephrase that. We do as an association, because it's not just me, it's us. We need to get the certifications done and teach officials how to score, as well as look out for the best interest and the safety of every fighter, cage side as well as in the ring.
Mike, what amazes me, John, I'm sure you'll agree, how few professional fighters, high-level professional fighters, have no idea what the ABC is. They think you're talking about ABC television network. That's got to be something you want to look at, is just raising the awareness.
Yeah, we want to be prominent in the industry, all combative sports, not just boxing and MMA, Muay Thai, Sundo, grappling. We need to set precedents and say, listen, we're here to look out for the best interest of the fighter, and let's do the right thing for the fighter. Because as we all know, that the fighters' careers are very short. They're approximately 10 years, I would say, for a fighter to make the money they can. So we have to look out for them as an individual and make sure that the fighters are protected for the promoter, let alone their managers and their trainers.
So when it comes to the ABC right now meets once a year, basically. And in that once a year meeting, that's where some things are passed, some things are brought up for consideration, some of them are tabled, and some new committees are brought about. Is there anything that you think you can do that can possibly speed up that process and make this more viable for a change when it comes to the combat sports that needs to take place?
Well, that's an interesting question, because what I would like to do, I'm going to recommend this tomorrow. Of course, that's my first day on the job. I'm going to recommend to the association that I would like to have quarterly meetings to discuss telephonically, of course, or Skype, to have quarterly meetings to discuss what's occurring in each state and each tribal land, and how can we address the problems and help and assist in making sure the sport is moving forward. I think, we're in the 21st century. I think technology is great. I believe in the web, and I believe in the MMA registry. I want to get boxing on the same page when it comes to fight facts. So there's a lot of things we can do to better the sport. But technology is very important when it comes to the future of mixed martial arts.
You mentioned combat sports. John, we talk about combat sports all the time. Something that's bothered me for a long time, as much as I love boxing as an MMA guy first and foremost, is that mixed martial arts has the governing body, the Association of Boxing Commissions. The name just sounds antiquated. It sounds like it comes out of an era when people weren't even recognizing MMA as a legitimate sport. And now I think virtually every state in the U.S., there are more MMA shows than there are boxing shows. I think the name needs to reflect that.
Well, the interesting thing is, and I don't think many people understand this, that in mixed martial arts, the first states/tribes that regulated mixed martial arts was Nevada, New Jersey, and Mohegan. So actually, the Mohegan tribe helped write the unified rules of mixed martial arts. John remembers that. And we were down in New Jersey many years ago. I could say 2001. I was a chief inspector back then. But yeah, what I would like to recommend to the association, of course, I was elected president, so I'm going to recommend it to them. I'm going to recommend to them that we change the name and make it all combative sports. Of course, there's a mandate, federal law, when it comes to the Muhammad Ali Act in boxing, but there's no federal law on combative sports. But we all can agree that we regulate combative sports like we regulate boxing. And again, that's for the safety of the fighter.
And just to clarify my point, I'm not saying it should be called the Association of Mixed Martial Arts. It's combat sports. So we're talking about MMA, boxing, Muay Thai, kickboxing. When you have the name boxing, John, don't you agree? It just sounds antiquated. I can't think of another sport that has a regulatory body with the name of an entirely different sport in it.
Well, when you're looking at what the ABC is, as far as Association of Boxing Commissions, it really is the Association of Combative Sports Commissions, because all commissions are doing more than just boxing now. All except for New York. Let's be honest. And someday they'll get their act together and they'll be doing the same as everyone else. But the combative sports of Muay Thai, kickboxing, MMA, and boxing is what all of these regulators are working within right now, and it does need to reflect it. The real question I have is, I'm going straight to MMA with you. I'm going to put you in the corner here.
Hot seat.
Yeah, well, you know what? Because you were there. You know, it's funny. A lot of people sit there and claim that, I was there for the making of the unified rules. And I always laugh and say, well, you know what? You want me to tell you the truth of who was there? But I can actually say that Mike Mazzulli was there, which is, interesting that now the president of the ABC is a guy that was part of that, because there's not a whole lot of people that were. But those rules have been around for a long time, and they've stuck. And I understand why, they've stuck, as far as a lot of them being, that they've really kept fighters safe. It's been it's helped with competitive fights, but there's some rules that we have that are just antiquated. Mm-hmm. They're just ridiculous. And we need to get, someone every year, in my opinion, looking at the rules of both MMA and boxing to say, is there anything that we can do better to make this sport better for the fighters, better for the officials, better for the fans, so it's not, in times that we have things happen, that it's a stupid rule that ends up changing the outcome of a fight.
Absolutely, and I think what I would like to do with of course, the body of the ABC is review all rules and policies on a yearly basis. I think, as of right now, I don't think we've done that. I don't think we've moved to the 21st century. We're definitely not using the technology aspect of what we can do with the web and suspensions and how we post suspensions. And I am going to promote technology. I'm going to promote reviewing all the rules. You talk about Muay Thai and MMA and Sundo and, hey, listen, grappling, amateur MMA and amateur boxing. I mean, that's another whole aspect. Amateur Muay Thai. That's stuff we have to look at individually and come up as an ABC membership and make decisions on all this. And it's something that's not going to occur overnight, but it has to be done. And I agree with you. I think we need to really move forward and make sure that the fighter is protected. And let's make sure our rules and regulations reflect that. Let's make sure it reflects what we need to do to protect the fighter, but also make it interesting for the spectator.
The three of us talked about this at dinner tonight, is that the National Football League has the competition committee. Every year, the competition committee meets and says, how do we make the NFL better than it was the previous year? What rules are working? What aren't working? What needs to be changed? They make recommendations, and then they're voted upon. They're not locked in a time capsule. And when we talk about 12 to 6 elbows, which most people agree is ridiculous, or heel strikes to the kidneys, most people agree are ridiculous, they're there because they're there. And nobody has taken the steps, like in the NFL, to say, you know what, maybe this isn't working. Maybe it was relevant then, but it's not relevant now.
I have to say, we discussed the north-south elbows, and as we all know, I would rather get hit by a north-south elbow than an east-west elbow, or what's that? That's a northeast, southwest elbow.
Northwest, southwest.
Yeah, so I mean, I understand that, and we need to address those issues. At the Mohegan Tribe, I allow south-north elbows if you're on the ground or if you're throwing a south. And as we know, that's not as it's not as impactful as a north or a southwest. Yeah, you know what I mean? Across the body elbow is definitely more impactful than a south-north elbow. So yeah, we definitely need to do that. And I want to set up a committee that will actually review all the regulations, all the unified rules, not just of MMA, but everything. I know we have unified rules of Muay Thai. Let's address that. Unified rules of boxing. Let's address it, because we need to move into the 21st century and make sure we're looking at this as a safety issue, number one, and number two is a fan issue. Is a fans accepted? What I would like to do in the future, with the clearance of the association, of course, is bring in promoters, bring in fighters. We're going to Las Vegas next year, excuse me, for the conference, and in Las Vegas, I would love to see Mickey Ward come in and talk about his career. I'd love to see. I already spoken to King Mo when he was at my place last time, when he was working at Corner Bellator last week. And he said, absolutely, Commissioner, I'd love to come out there and speak to the body and tell them what I think we should be doing. Because you know what? At the end of the day, it's all about the safety of the fighter. We discussed this recently, that, they have a very short span to make money. And you know what? The bottom line is the safety is the most concerning of me, making sure the fighters are going to do the right thing and we're going to protect them so they can continue their career.
when you sit there, the one question I have, you're sitting there talking about possibly changing the rules, so you're going to have these committees. Who are you going to place? I think one of the biggest problems that we've had in the past is we have, unfortunately, a lot of people that are part of combative sport regulation never were part of combative sports and don't really understand what certain aspects are because they never were hit by it, never, did anything. Is there anything you're going to change in the way those, we'll say a competition committee or the committee to review those rules, who are you going to put on those committees?
Well, the interesting thing is that in a perfect world, and I'll go to the body before I suggest this, and this is just my, guys got to remember it's been 12 hours since I got this. All right,
that's why I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah, I appreciate it, but it's been 12 hours since I've become the president of the ABC, and I appreciate the association voting for me, having enough confidence, believe that I can do the right thing. But in a perfect world, I'd like to go to the association and explain to them, listen, I think we need to have people from the outside review policies and procedures. And you know what? Ex-fighters is a fine example to start. Hey, Tank Gabbett that fought at Mohegan in 2002? Whenever it was, you know what? Things have changed since then. We need to move into the new, into the 21st century. And but I would love to have fighters on the board coming in to Las Vegas, giving their opinions. And what do you think of the rules? What should change? What shouldn't change? We talked about that north-south elbow. Do we want knees to the head of a grounded opponent? Sometimes I wonder to myself, and I'll bring it to the association, is that accepted? Because if you can't protect yourself from getting a knee on the ground, maybe you shouldn't be you shouldn't be in a MMA fight. So that this is all that we'll look at. We'll look at everything, help me out here.
Encompassing.
Thank you very much. It's kind of late. I apologize. I'm on East Coast time right now. What again?
Encompassing.
Thank you. Let's look at it all and see how it works out. You know what I mean? And one thing is, guys, as you know, I'm a very passionate person. I mean, all combative sports. You talk to anybody in Connecticut or Massachusetts, if there's something going on, I'm present, I'm watching it, I'm learning. And I've helped a lot of states as well as tribes actually have their rules and pass their rules and regs through either the legislature or through tribal government. And the bottom line is, I want to look out for the best interest of the fighter, and that's what we're all here for, because we want to make sure at the end of their careers they have a successful career and they're healthy.
Mike, I think one of the things, John, would you agree that's going to be so tough about being the new president is just how diverse this group is. I mean, you look at Andy Foster, who's the executive director of California, former pro MMA fighter. Brian Dunn, who was just elected, he's now your first vice president. He's in charge of Nebraska, former pro MMA fighter.
We got MMA guys taking over, baby.
But you know what? But I promise.
Many years ago.
but I promise you that there are people here at this convention, not naming names, who are representing their state either as a commissioner or an executive director. I don't care if they know who I am. Okay, they watch Bellator, they watch M1. They don't know who you are, John. Now, how can you work in combat sports in the year 2015? They have no idea who you are. That's where this is tough, because you have the hardcores, you have former pro fighters, people like yourself who helped write the unified rules, and then people who are maybe bureaucrats or state appointees who are truly blissfully unaware of what this is. How do you not know Big John McCarthy?
Blissfully unaware.
Blissfully unaware.
Nice.
Well, the interesting thing is that's an issue the ABC has to address. We have to educate these people. We educate these individuals that were elected or appointed by their governors, as well as in the tribes. There's a lot of tribes that are learning. Let's work together to make the association the best that we are, and let's work together for the safety of the fighter. Let's make sure if you head out to a tribal reservation, there's going to be regulation. We know of many promoters that don't. They go out to tribes because there's no regulation. They appoint their own officials. They appoint their own referees. They even bring their own doctor in. So we need to make sure that we are overseeing it throughout the whole United States as well as overseas. I think we really need to look out for the fighter and make sure that we're going to regulate to the best of our ability.
You know what? I just want to tell you thank you very much for your time. And I just got one last thing to say to you. Well, I mean, because, I work for Mike a lot. And every time before a show or before I go in the cage, Mike looks at me and says, "Don't fuck this up." So, Mike, Don't fuck this up.
Hey, listen, I must admit I really appreciate the support. You know, and I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to have a lot of fun. We all are going to have fun within the ABC. You know, I think you'll see a lot different ABC with me running as president and working for the best interest of the body. I think that the Las Vegas conference coming up is great. I think it makes my life really easy because you know what? Then the amount of people that reside, fighters, retired, as well as active fighters in Las Vegas. Hey guys, it's not just MMA. I know you guys are MMA guys, but it's boxers. It's Muay Thai guys. It's Sun Do guys. There's a lot of talent in Las Vegas. I mean, the biggest promoters of boxing are in Las Vegas. You know, to get Top Rank there to give their opinions. You know what I mean? To get Golden Boy to give their opinions. I think it's going to work really well. I know, you know, the commission in Nevada is going to help out, and I think it's going to be a great association meeting. And the nice thing too is I also want to make sure before that we all are meeting and looking out for the safety and the protection of the fighter. Because the bottom line is that's what we're here for. That's what we're mandated for as the Association of Boxing Commissioners.
Mike, and I'll just say personally, you and I have been friends for 6 years, but I didn't know you. I knew you by reputation. It was my third Bellator, and I saw how you did things. And I thought, this is the type of guy that we need in the sport. So, man, I'm telling you, on behalf of myself, John, you've just said your sentiments. People listening, believe John and me. You are the man for the job, Mike. And really, you've done such a great job at Mohegan. And this has got to be a big moment for you.
I'll tell you, it's great. I mean, I'm really excited. It was funny, when I got elected, I was a little shell-shocked. I sat there and said, wow, now what do I do? But you know what? As time goes on, I know what I need to do. I know what we need to do as an association. I know we need to grow. I know we need to make sure that, you know what, the fighters are protected. Not just protected medically, but protected with the promoters, protected with, you know, making sure that's fair, making sure the judges and referees are qualified, making sure the inspectors look at the wraps in the back of the house and they know what they're looking at. They need to be educated. They need to be passionate like myself. I'm a very passionate person. And listen, like I said to everybody when I asked for their vote, I said, guys, I don't sleep. I sleep 4 hours a day. I love what I do. I love combative sports, and let's just get it done. Let's have fun. That's the bottom line. Is I want to have fun. I want the association to have fun, but we also have to do the right thing. Thank you,
Mike. Last thing from me. I think so much of this is awareness, and John, you and I don't count as media. I hate to say that, but our podcast, we're not media. I am, or at least I was, an MMA commentator.
I wanted to speak to me, so you're media to me.
But you know what?
The
The media should be here, and I don't blame the media because they don't know what's going on. I blame the fact that the ABC has been ticking along, and they've never popped up on the radar screen. I covered early in my career, I covered 2 NFL owners meetings. That was crawling with media. And I can only imagine in the 10 or 12 years since I was in my last one, how much media there is. I think if the media understands how big this is, the MMA media, they'll get on board and the fans will understand. I'm guessing a lot of our listeners to Let's Get It On are really learning about what the ABC does. That's not the fault of the media. That's not the fault of the listeners. I hate to say it, Mike, but it's the fault of the previous regimes of the ABC that hardcore fans, boxing, MMA, they have no idea what any of this is about.
That's interesting. You know what? I commend Tim for everything he's done in the last 14 years. You know, he did work on the MMA database, which is great, and that's basically. And the interesting thing is, I don't even think the media understands that we have an MMA database for suspensions of fighters. We're looking out for the best interest and the safety of every fighter. But we do need to move into the 21st century. We need to get more electronic. We need to get more updated with some of the systems out there. Yeah, we talk about when I gave my speech, I said to the guys, guys, I want to have a news line. And then everyone's like, what do you mean? I said, I want to have a news line where, you know what, in Kansas, a second is a complete idiot, all right? And you know what? And all of a sudden he comes up to Mohegan to a second. And I don't even know him. I don't even know that the Kansas Commission has actually revoked his license. We need a news line where, you know what, you can put that information in. And when he shows up to Mohegan, I'll say, hey, listen, what are you acting like an idiot in Kansas for? And if you suspend him, hey, guess what? Get the fuck out of my fucking arena because you're not working here, because you're suspended in Kansas. So that's what we need. We need a lot more communication within the ABC. And I think the new the new regime and the new board of directors, which includes Dunn from Nebraska, Mike Kostreva from Connecticut, Joe Walsh from Iowa, and Lydia Robinson from Arkansas. Hey, listen, that's a great team. And I'm not going to be who I am unless my team are on. And I always tell these guys that work for me at home, I'm only as good as who I surround myself with. And I have to admit, I surround myself with a great team and expect a lot of the ABC and expect us to be out in the forefront of all combative sports. Not just your shit MMA stuff, but boxing, Muay Thai, all that stuff. All right? I'm a Muay Thai guy. I love Muay Thai. That's my passion. I'll drive, 180 miles to watch a Muay Thai fight. So, but we're going to do all of this. We're going to work together. We're going to make the ABC better. We're going to make it more in the national spotlight. So, I want to have fun, and all my guys that voted for me as well as the association want to have fun. We want to learn. We want to be educated, and that's what the Association of Boxing Commissioners are going to be from now on, as long as I'm president.
That's Mike Mazzulli, the newly elected president of the ABC, who spoke with us earlier here in San Diego. Well, of course, every week on Let's Get It On, we bring you our poll question. You can cast your vote on our website, letsgetitonpodcast.com. So with the Mike Mazzulli interview in mind, here's this week's poll question. Do you feel that changes need to be made to the unified rules of MMA? Let us know what you think by voting yes or no at letsgetitonpodcast.com. Still to come on this week's episode of Let's Get It On, Big John and I will be joined by UFC Vice President Jeff Novitzky for an in-depth discussion on drug testing and drug use in MMA. And we'll answer your questions submitted via email to info@letsgetitonpodcast.com. With John McCarthy, I'm Sean Wheelock, and you are listening to Let's Get It On. It's the book that Wrestling Observer calls a must-read for any MMA fan. Jonathan Snowden of Bleacher Report describes as riveting and amazing, and TheFightNerd.com says nothing is held back. Pick this book up right away. Is This Legal? The inside story of the first UFC from the man who created it, written by UFC founder Art Davie and me, Sean Wheelock, with the foreword by John McCarthy, is now available to listeners of this podcast at the special price of $12.48. That's far less than you'll pay for the book on Amazon and half price of what you'll pay in-store at Barnes & Noble. Buy it directly from the publisher now online at ascendbooks.com and enter the promo code LEGAL50. That's ASCEND books.com, promo code LEGAL50. Learn the true story of how the UFC came into existence in the book that Randy Couture describes as honest, shocking, and enthralling, and that has a rating of 4.9 out of 5 stars from Amazon Reader Reviews. Is This Legal? The inside story of the first UFC from the man who created it, by UFC founder Art Davie and me, Sean Wheelock, with the foreword by Big John McCarthy. Available now online at ascendbooks.com for just $12.48 when you use the promo code LEGAL50. Hey, this is Sean Wheelock.
And this is Big John McCarthy.
If you're a fan of our show, then you're going to love the rest of the Ignotainment podcast lineup.
Like the Ocho Man behind the 8 Ball and the Whiskey Philosopher with Jeff Cooper.
You can find these great podcasts and more at ignotainment.com. Thanks again and enjoy the rest of the program.
Let's get it on! When looking for new and exciting clothing concepts, look no further than Lambs to Lions. Lambs to Lions has great designs that incorporates the past from boxing with the new and exciting evolution of MMA. We all start out as lambs, but with time, training, and hard work, we can all become lions. Be part of the Lambs to Lions movement and check out all of their great designs. You can get your Lambs to Lions gear at the Las Vegas Fight Shop or go to lambstolionsbrand.com.
Now, back to Let's Get It On with your hosts, Big John McCarthy and Sean Wheelock.
Every week on this podcast, Big John and I answer your questions. Ask away via email, info@letsgetitonpodcast.com. Again, ask anything that you would like, info@letsgetitonpodcast.com. And of course, as I say on every single episode of this show, and I always will, please include a pronunciation guide for your name. First up, Tom Glenn, who asks, John, how close were you to stopping the Lawler-Macdonald fight near the start of the fourth round when Robbie seemed a bit out of it?
You know what's funny is because of the Association of Boxing Commissions here, I taught both Saturday and Sunday reffing and judging. And on the judging day, I actually played the Robbie Lawler-Rory Macdonald fight. It was actually the first time that I actually got to see it other than when I was at the fight. And it was interesting to look and see because there's been people that asked me, and I understand why they thought I was close to stopping the fight. In the fact that my body motion, I made a movement, and that was a movement because Robbie was talking to me and I couldn't hear him. And I never was in my mind close to stopping the fight on Robbie. I thought Robbie was, at certain points he was starting to just accept, damage from Rory, and he wasn't responding. And the whole thing as a referee that I want the fighter to show me that they're responding in some fashion. And when I say in some fashion, it doesn't have to be that, he's throwing punches and fighting back. He can do that. That's great. That's telling me as the referee, hey, the brain's still working. I know where I'm at. I know that, what's happening, and I'm trying to do things to counter what my opponent is doing and kind of do something that can get him off of me. That's a smart fighter. That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for him to move. Just movement itself is going to tell me, hey, that, okay, I got a little bit of a problem here. I'm trying to get myself out. He's going to have to come chase me a little bit. That movement is telling me you're thinking. Grabbing a hold of him, getting in close, making it to where he can't damage you due to the closeness of the distance. That's something that we're looking for. When that fight was into that, especially in the beginning of the fourth round, Robbie got hurt in the end of the third round. In the beginning, he started to take shots, and he started at a certain point to just slow that production down as far as throwing back. He wasn't moving. He was up against the fence. His feet were flat. And he was not trying to reach out to start to control Rory or anything like that. And it got to a point where I just told him, Robbie, fight back. Because in the back, I've told him, when I say fight back, this is what it means. When I say move, get out, this is what it means to you. And this is what I want to see. And so Robbie's, when I said, Robbie, fight back, he just was, he's trying to give just little head movements, and he slip punches. And he just looked at me and said, John, I'm fighting. And it was, okay, show me something with what you're doing. So did I ever get really close? No, I can understand based upon, that little movement I made towards Rory and Robbie at a certain point that people were thinking that, I was thinking of stopping. No, I was trying to actually hear him. So that fight was not, in my mind, Robbie was not my problem in that fight. Rory was my problem, and Rory was the one that I was concerned with most of the time. And if you were in there, you would understand why, because Rory just was taking a lot of damage. He's incredibly tough. What he did in that fight was amazing for how much he took, and and to continue to fight in the manner that he did. He was actually winning the fight on the scorecards, although he was accepting a ton of damage.
Next question comes from Michael Bell, who's a great MMA referee and also a friend of ours. So Michael asks, John, if you could get rid of certain rules that you think are irrelevant, what would they be? And I'm going to weigh in on this too, but you first.
Good. Let's hear what you have to say. Come on, I want to hear it.
12-6 elbows and heel strikes to the kidneys. Ridiculous rules.
With you, okay? That's both of those are just the 12-6 elbow. The biggest problem with it is not that it affects fights in a bad way, as far as its ability to damage. It affects fights in a bad way because the fans, for the most part, don't understand it. And they think that any elbow strike with a hand pointing in any form of up is illegal, where it's not. It's a matter of only one stupid strike with the elbow is illegal, and that's when you take that linear straight up, straight down, no variation of angle at all, no movement of putting an arc to it in any fashion. It is just a completely linear strike. That's the only thing that is illegal. But people get this thing, and Travis Brown is coming down and his hand is going, we'll say, from 10 o'clock down to 4 o'clock. They're saying, oh, that's illegal. No, it's not. So that elbow strike should be taken out because it's not a go-to elbow strike that people would, we're just going to jump to doing that because it's so effective in the sport. It's not. It wouldn't change the sport in any fashion other than it would take away a lot of confusion, and it would make it to where fighters know I can move my arm in any way. It doesn't matter as far as the angle, and I'm not being restricted by anything other than what I decide is beneficial for me to do at this time. Mike Bell knows that. He's a really good referee, and he's an outstanding judge. And so for him to ask that question, he's just being stupid. He knows the answer.
Well, what about heel strikes to the kidneys? And I think, and I don't know if this is the case, I think that comes out of the rematch between Royce Gracie and Ken Shamrock, where Royce Gracie was stuck on his back. He's holding a lot of guard, a lot of open guard. Shamrock's not really moving or posturing in top position, and Royce is just bombarding Shamrock's body, including in the kidneys, the rib cage, the side, and the hips with his heels. Is that where it comes from? That's the only thing I can think of.
That's basically where it comes from. It comes from people seeing that, but it comes from the world of boxing. Because in boxing, a kidney punch is not allowed. Because in boxing, we cut our fighter off at that hip line, and it goes straight up their side. And so the kidney is actually to the rear of the fighter. And so in boxing, a kidney punch is illegal. And with commissions, they looked and said, well, we can't have someone heel kicking to an area that in boxing we don't allow. They didn't understand, and we tried to explain to them that if I do a roundhouse kick, it's going to hit the kidney. Now, I can do a roundhouse kick that travels at 100 and some miles an hour and hit that kidney, but I can't do this little heel kick going at 15 miles an hour. There's something wrong with your rules there. So I was at Jeremy Horn's teaching a class one time, and Jeremy, he sat there and he says, no, John, I think I can really do damage with that kick. He goes, it's something that, I like to use. I can't use it. And I go, I'll tell you what, come on up here. And I bring him up. I said, put me in guard. Come on, get on your floor. You start doing your heel kicks. I'm going to start teaching the class. And I put my hands on his chest, right? And I'm just a little postured up. And he starts kicking away. And I'm teaching. I said, so now when we look at this next rule, and I'm going, and it goes on for about a minute, and he finally goes, fuck. And he gets away from me. He goes, all right, you proved your point. I go, no, I'm going to die. I'm telling you, oh my God, my kidneys are going to bleed tomorrow. And within 5 days, Dimmock, I'm done. And he just looked at me like I was an ass. But it's the truth. You can't generate enough power on that kick to truly damage me. Your side can get sore, but the kick itself is not going to do something that's going to damage the fighter and affect the fighter's safety in the fight.
That really opens up a great topic. So for all of our listeners, here's something for you. Send us an email, info@letsgetitonpodcast.com. Tell us what rule or rules in the unified rules you think are ridiculous, need to be removed, or flip it the other way. Let us know what you think needs to be put in that is not in the unified rules. And of course, ask any question you would like. We get to them every single week. Again, our address, info@letsgetitonpodcast.com. Well, this past April, the UFC announced that Jeff Novitzky had been hired as the promotion's first ever vice president of athlete health and performance. Novitzky has come to international prominence for his work in performance-enhancing drug investigations that have included Barry Bonds, Lance Armstrong, Marion Jones, and Roger Clemens. Earlier here at the 2015 ABC convention in San Diego, California, Big John and I spoke with Jeff Novitzky, and I started our conversation by asking him what he feels is the biggest challenge in his job at the UFC.
Well, right now, my initial role mostly involved the putting together our new anti-doping policy. And really what we want to do and what we're in the process of doing right now is getting out and educating all of our fighters, letting them know exactly, what the policy entails. I think maybe the biggest challenge surrounding that is the whereabouts policy. So our anti-doping drug testing program is going to be a 365-day-a-year program where a fighter could be tested unannounced any of those days. And in order to do that, the fighters have to notify USADA, who's administering our program, generally where they're going to be each day. And that's a tall task to, a population of individuals is not used to doing that. And so getting them into that program, letting them understand how it works, making sure that, they're up to date on where they're going to be is important, because, the whole program stands on being able to locate them anytime.
My big question, I think the big concern with fighters when it comes to this new drug testing that they're going to be doing out of the UFC with USADA is, I don't think a lot of them are that concerned. There are guys that are actually taking stuff and that are now saying, okay, I'm not going to take it because my opponent can't take it. That's great. That's a great way of cleaning up the sport. But a lot of them are really concerned about the IV situation as far as they're doing these big weight cuts. And you and I have talked about this in the past about why the weight cuts are there and stuff. How are you planning on appeasing their concerns and educating them? What's the things that you're going to be going through to help them with this process?
Yeah, John, it took me a little bit by surprise too, the pervasiveness of the IV use and the strong feelings that a lot of our fighters have around it. Last 3 or 4 weeks, that's what myself and USADA have been doing, is just getting out on the road, both domestically here and internationally, and educating our guys and and girls, and at the end, open up to question and answers. And every time, that's the issue that comes up first. And so we're doing things on multiple fronts. We're providing them with the research that shows that orally rehydrating over a 24 to 36 hour period is as good and safer than using an IV administration. And then sharing stories that we've heard about some of the nightmares with bad applications of IV administration, some of the bad stories surrounding severe weight cuts. I think that the IVs are used in a sense as a crutch to those individuals who are losing too much weight in an unsafe manner. I think if the weight cut is safe and at an appropriate level, I think all the research has shown that oral rehydration is as safe, if not safer, and just as effective.
Jeff, one thing that John and I have talked in the past on our podcast is about, we think it's very impressive, right, John, that the UFC is going the third-party route with the U.S. anti-doping agency, USADA. The NFL, for instance, doesn't do that. Can you explain for the layman why it's important that the UFC is not administering this drug test? You're the quote-unquote drug czar of the UFC, but you're using the third party in USADA, and why that's important and why that differs from Major League Baseball or the NFL.
It's important, the independence, because there's no business interest in the administration of this program. So there could never be an allegation that there's favoritism in terms of who's being selected to be tested. There could never be an allegation that there is a sanction that's hand down is being done for business reasons. We handed this to the most credible anti-doping agency in the world, that has a 15-year history of doing this, that is responsible to the WADA code, and all of their decisions, all of the determination of who's being tested, all the sanctions are being done for one reason, and that's for a clean and fair sport.
It's funny because I've been working quite a few UFCs, and everyone I'm going to, Jeff is at, and we've been talking. And my question for you is this: is you've worked with other entities like Major League Baseball. I'm not sure if you worked with the NFL or not, but now that you've had those huge entities in both of those, and you're working with UFC, what differences and what similarities do you see in the structures of what the athletes are having to do and what they're trying to do as far as to appease and conform to the right thing that USADA wants?
Yeah, well, first of all, I have worked closely with Major League Baseball and NFL, and I don't want to disparage them. I mean, I've made the statement several times that this is the best anti-doping program in professional sports in the world, and that's true. That's accurate, 100%. But that's not to say these other organizations aren't, doing a good job. There's, I think a lot of similarities in that, there's athletes in all these sports that are competing against individuals for a lot of money, for financial security, and the temptation to use these drugs is strong. When you're talking millions of dollars in contracts, and combining that with the fact that Some athletes don't trust that their sports leagues care enough, or don't trust that their opponents aren't using. You combine those two things, and I've always said I don't agree with the decisions that a lot of these athletes who use are making, but a part of me understands why they are. So the biggest thing that we did in putting this program together, I think, is, and it comes down to one word, and that's trust, that our guys and girls can trust that this organization does care, that we're using every resource out there available to, let them trust that their opponents aren't, going to partake in performance-enhancing drugs. And, if they are and they get caught, there's severe sanctions under this program, pretty much career enders.
And my one question is, since you've been there, have you caught anyone yet? And obviously don't care who it is, but has that situation, has it arisen now and people still are at that point they think that I'm not going to get caught?
Well, we're really in the infancy of the UFC program. It came into play July 1st. I know there has been some testing, but the primary emphasis early on is getting out and educating them, getting the whereabouts program up and running so that we truly can test anyone, anytime. There have been several positives since I've been here, but they've been kind of under the old program where commissions were running the testing, or in non-commissioned areas, the UFC would step in and do that. So, there have been some, and that concerns me a little bit because, most of those tests were done the night of the fights, and that's really just an IQ test. Unfortunately some people are failing. And so that concerns me when, when you're running into a situation where it's very obvious when a test is coming and athletes are still testing positive for that. It concerns me what's going to happen when there's year-round testing. But, again, that falls on me as part of our education and outreach, getting out there and letting our athletes know that how serious this is, and that there are no loopholes to get around in this policy. And, whatever was occurring in the past, if anything, needs to stop, or you're facing serious consequences here.
Jeff, one of the controversies we hear in the fight community, even from fighters, is about recreational drugs, street drugs, that they'll say, I have a medical marijuana card. Now, John, you and I have made our opinion clear on this. Whether you have a medical marijuana card or not, you have to play by the rules of your employer, as independent contractor, full-time employee, whatever. Fighters are independent contractors. But how do you answer those criticisms? Like, well, we understand elevated testosterone rates or human growth hormone, those are cheaters. But if a guy has marijuana in his system, or even heroin, isn't that his own business? How do you explain that, and then to even fighters? And then why is it important on the two sides?
Actually just say heroin? My God, marijuana
John,
and heroin, there's a little bit of a difference
John,
there.
but we've seen, though, there are people who say, you know what, we understand drug cheats, but if the guys want to shoot heroin or take cocaine, that's their own business, because those aren't quote-unquote performance enhancing. That's out there.
Good, please don't.
Well, we don't want any of our fighters to use any recreational drugs, just for health consequences. Many of them are illegal. However, our anti-doping program, we're not trying to play the moral police here. If we do find out an instance where our athletes are using, we'll do everything we can to get them help and rehabilitation. But in terms of the anti-doping program, those drugs, marijuana, cocaine, are prohibited in competition only, and will be tested for in competition only. The threshold for marijuana, which is consistent with the WADA code, is 150 nanograms per milliliter, which is a pretty high threshold. And that's done because really the only significant advantage that you would have to using one of those recreational drugs in terms of competition would be, while you were fighting, not while you were training when a fight wasn't coming up. But again, that being said, we as a company don't want any of our fighters using any of these drugs. And, if they are, and we find out through other routes out of competition, we're going to help them get them the help they need to get them off them.
John, you and I have talked a lot about the medical marijuana cards, but like in my home state, in Kansas, for example, you can't have alcohol backstage before a fight, and it's perfectly legal to have alcohol. So there's always the line of what rights you have as a private citizen, but then what rights do you have as an employee?
Yeah, but they're giving them the rights as a private citizen, because what he's telling you with this non-competition is not being tested, meaning that if someone comes to their door and knocks on the door and says, I need a sample, and then they take that sample, and this person has a fight, we'll say 1 week down the road. And that sample comes up with more than the 150 nanograms of marijuana.
He's a lot smarter than we are.
Thank you very much. Nothing's going to be done. That's their medical marijuana card work for them. Where that window is that window of 12 hours from that point of the competition at I believe the weigh-in is what it is?
Yeah, in competition definition is 6 hours before the weigh-in to 6 hours after the fight. And we've actually had a question on the other end from a lot of fighters. Well, why 6 hours after the fight? I mean, are you going to let me go to a party after the fight and then show up and test me? And no, the reason that that's in there is, I think we talked about it today. Sometimes a fighter will be transported to a hospital and a collector would have to wait out some time before that fighter is prepared and ready to provide a sample. So that's the reason for that definition. But in competition, again, 6 hours before the weigh-in till 6 hours after the bout.
It all work. This is telling you that they're not there trying to take away. There's a lot of guys, there's a lot of girls out there that are going to say, you know what, during training I get these bumps and bruises and, it helps me relax or sleep. They're not saying they can't do it. It is the performance-enhancing drugs don't have that out-of-competition attachment. So you can have your medical marijuana.
Even your heroin, right?
Jeez, I can't even believe you went there. Now we're going to start talking about methamphetamines and cocaine. I'm out of here.
But those arguments are out there. But
it's ridiculous.
It is ridiculous.
It's illegal.
But do the fighters understand the difference, or is that part of your educational process in your job? What are you testing for in competition and out of competition?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely part of the education, and that, other than the IV issue, is probably the second most popular question from our population of fighters. And yeah, that's why we're getting out there, these first 2-3 months, why an emphasis is on education to fill in those holes in those questions.
Here's my question is you guys have the Fight Summit. Is that really the vehicle that you're using for education as your main base, and then you're going to different shows to answer questions if someone has them, or is there another way that you guys are actually enhancing the education of all these fighters? Because you got fighters from around the world. That's not an easy thing to say, we're educating people, but it's hard to reach out to everybody.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, John. So we had the Fighter Summit with, probably about 50 guys and girls from around the world. We've been targeting big gyms that have big populations of UFC fighters, both here, and we've already been international on that. And then we're trying to hit each fight card as it comes up. So the Wednesday before a Saturday fight is usually reserved for some type of education session. The last 6 months, it was the outfitting policy that fighters came in, and there was a mandatory hour session for each corner. That's now been replaced with the anti-doping education session. It'll be happening down in Rio tomorrow night. USADA will be handling it because I'll still be here. But we hope, it's probably going to take another couple months of going out and hitting those other big gyms and fight cards, but we hope after 3 or 4 months it will have reached most of those of our athletes. The last kind of aspect of that is in order to register for the whereabouts program, where the fighters will be required to tell USADA where they're at. In order to register online for that, there is a half-hour to 45-minute online education that they have to go through and compete before they're allowed to register and get into the whereabouts program. So between in-person and online education, and then just ongoing education, I get 4 to 5 calls a day from fighters, managers, trainers with questions, and I expect that'll be ongoing for months and years to come.
All right, here I may be putting you on the spot here, but it's the question that I have because
it's not about heroin, is it?
I'm going to kill you. Someone's going to get hit with a heroin in a second. Really, my question was this: when I watched the press conference that the UFC put together to announce USADA coming in, you were part of that press conference, and it was you obviously work for the UFC, and the UFC is the biggest MMA promotion that we have. It has the most fighters by far. But there's so many fighters that are out there that are not part of the UFC. And it really appeared to me that USADA, at the time of that press conference, didn't even really look at anything as far as, I don't think they understood that there's actually MMA besides the UFC. Mm-hmm. It almost seemed to me like they thought that they were going to be testing everybody that's fighting MMA. And what is it that you think can be done? And I know it's not on you, but to bring in the other promotions and other things to hit that level that what the UFC is now basically put this high watermark out there. What do you think can be done to try to get people to understand this is so important that it needs to be done?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You hit the nail on the head there. We want to raise the bar for everybody else. We want to set the standard, not just for other MMA organizations, but other professional sports leagues. Looking at UFC and saying, wow, that's the way to do it. That's a gold standard program. And, potentially indirectly putting, pressure on other MMA organizations, other leagues to, let's clean up sports across the board.
I'm sure you've had this question throughout your career, long before you came to the UFC. But, John, I'll use your word idiot. It's an idiot opinion. People who say, let them cheat. It doesn't matter. What does it matter? They're all a bunch of cheaters. I'm sure you've heard that your entire career. What's your standard response to that?
Yeah, and it goes down to a personal level. My dad was a high school basketball coach growing up, and so from the minute, I can walk, I was following him to practices and games, and he did things and coached the right way. And I'm by far, from a perfect person, but most of the good traits I have, I can trace directly to lessons I learned in sports that, transcended sports. The ability to, work as a team, to work individually under pressure, to be coached or constructively criticized. Those kinds of things benefit you, no matter what you do the rest of your life. And I think anytime you start inserting drugs into the equation, the health consequences about it, the ethical, quandaries surrounding it, I think is a terrible thing that bleeds down into the youth of the world. And I think there's, no part of it. So really our athletes are big role models to kids, and I think it starts there in terms of why I could never see it being okay that the drugs are okay to use in sports.
John, I know what you would call them.
Cheaters and idiots. The one thing I want to tell you, hey, I want to thank you. Thank you for trying to be part of cleaning up the sport that I love. I mean that. It means everything to me, and it needs to be done. I applaud the UFC for the efforts. The one thing that I don't think anyone understands is how much money this program is going to cost that promotion. This is not, I don't have the exact, but I guarantee it's well over $500,000 a year. Has to be well over that, I'd say.
Yeah, let's go higher than that.
Okay.
I mean, Lorenzo and Dana definitely put their money, where their mouths were, and they talked back in February when this issue kind of rose up about, putting together a comprehensive program, and they did that, and it's not cheap. It is not cheap to do something like this, and but it didn't stop them at all.
People from the outside, and I think general sports fans, fight fans included, just kind of use steroids as a blanket term. But on the inside, what is the biggest problem in terms of performance-enhancing drugs in MMA? Is it elevating testosterone rates? Is it human growth hormone? Is it anabolic steroids? EPO, right.
Yeah,
I guess strength and endurance. Like in cycling, for instance, it was all about endurance over strength. In weightlifting, it's about strength over endurance.
Yeah, there's many, many, many different classes of drugs that can give an athlete an advantage, and definitely a UFC, MMA type athlete an advantage. You have your anabolic steroids, you have your growth hormones and growth hormone releasers. You have drugs what John just talked about, blood doping drugs, so drugs that cause your body to produce more red blood cells, which in turn carry more oxygen to your muscles, which in turn give you more endurance. You can go and go and go. Certain thyroid medications can be used. Insulin can be used. There's really no stop to it. I read an article this week about a cyclist who was suspended for using a drug that was in the experimental phase, so it hadn't even been approved for human use yet, and yet the cyclist got a hold of it and was using it. So really, in my 15 years of experience in anti-doping, some athletes will stop at nothing to find or use a drug which is going to give them, some type of marginal gain or advantage.
What is it you're seeing most right now? Is it the elevated testosterone rates? Would you say that's the number one problem, or is there a number one problem?
Yeah, well, again, I'm pretty new here, only 3 months in, and our UFC program is just a couple weeks in. We're really just in the infancy stages. But in terms of other positives that we've had recently, that were, the sampling was taken on by commissions. Testosterone use, I think microdosing of testosterone is a big problem. So that would be small doses of testosterone used maybe more for recovery benefits versus, packing on big amounts of muscles. I think that's a huge issue. And I don't think it's, unique to MMA and UFC either. I think it spans across, sports culture. The use of small doses of testosterone, human growth hormone, and EPO and other blood doping drugs.
Yeah, I think most people don't even understand that when Jeff's talking about microdosing, we're talking about applying a cream. We're talking about this is not like they're shooting something into their butt or something like that. It's not a pill. It's as much as putting Jergens lotion basically on your arm. That's the microdosing, but that helps the athlete recover from the training, which is an advantage because that training that you're able to do at a higher output than your opponent who's being clean, that's the difference in getting yourself that much better for that competition. So when it comes to that night, yeah, you test out as being clean, but you weren't clean compared to that other competitor throughout that training cycle to get there, and so you have a distinct advantage.
Yeah, the microdosing, I think the best example of that was set by the cyclists, the Tour de France, where they, during the tour, 21 or so stages, were subject to testing every day, but were still able to find ways to use drugs at night and exploit an 8-hour window at night where the testers they knew wouldn't come between 10 p.m. and 6 in the morning. They, in the off-season, were able to perfect ways to use those drugs so that if they used them at 10:01, the earliest they could be tested at 6:01, the drugs would clear their system. And as John was saying, it would give them a recovery benefit by microdosing or using in small amounts, and then also give the benefit of quickly clearing the system so that if a drug test did occur early in the morning, they would be free of those drugs. Now, something in our policy to combat that, and I said again, we're trying to use every resource and tool out there, is we are going to use what's called a biological passport. And what that is going to do is over time, we will keep records on our athletes' drug results, looking at markers in both their blood and urine. And all humans should have a normal variance over time in those markers. And when you start seeing extreme variances either in the high or low end, there's science that says that would be the result of using one of these drugs, where you may not find the drug itself because it's cleared the system, but the results that it will leave behind in someone's urine or blood could be there for much longer.
Jeff, last thing that I want to ask you about, and John, I know you and me are all about personal accountability, and we've talked about this on the program, saying, man, I didn't know if somebody gave me something. You hear that all the time. I'm sure when you were an LAPD officer, I didn't know that was a crime. I didn't know that was illegal. Ignorance of the law isn't a defense, and you must get that all the time, and we're seeing that in public cases. Somebody gave me something. I bought something at GNC. I bought this off the internet. I didn't know. I'm not a cheater. It's not my fault. You must hear that constantly. I'm sure you heard that in other sports.
Yeah, definitely, but again, part of our education is there's strict liability here. And that's why hopefully on the front end we're getting out and educating, and a perfect example of what you're talking about is the dietary supplement industry. An industry from which my just most recent law enforcement career with the Food and Drug Administration, who oversaw the dietary supplement industry, showed me what a Wild West industry that is, that there are hundreds of supplements out there on the shelf that anyone can come by that have substances in them, either on the label or many times not listed on the label, that would cause one of our athletes to test positive. It would be a banned substance. So we cannot emphasize the importance enough about our athletes doing due diligence, research on what supplements they're taking, using me as an advocate and resource from within the UFC to help them, guide them through that. That being said, even though there is strict liability, there's also fairness built into our policy so that if there were mitigating circumstances where an athlete could show, hey, I bought this supplement, it wasn't on the label, it was contaminated with something, and we were able to show that, there could be the possibility of downward departure on what the sanction would be on our athletes, because we understand it's an issue and want to be fair. This program is in place to catch the intentional cheaters, not those that made a mistake or got something that was tainted. So there's built-in protections for our policy for that.
That's Jeff Novitzky, the UFC's Vice President of Athlete Health and Performance, who spoke with John and me earlier here in San Diego, California, as we're on site for the 2015 ABC Convention. We are back with you next week for an all-new episode of Let's Get It On, first available on Friday. Download and subscribe to our podcast on the iTunes Store. For Android, download the Stitcher app and subscribe. And you can go straight to our website, letsgetitonpodcast.com. You can also find us on social media, facebook.com/letsgetitonpodcast, and on Twitter @PodcastMMA for this show, and for us personally, @John McCarthy MMA and @Sean Wheelock. To ask us a question, make a comment, or inquire about becoming a sponsor of Let's Get It On, email us at info@letsgetitonpodcast.com. Again, that's info@letsgetitonpodcast.com. And do please help us spread the word. This is very much your podcast as much as it is ours. For Big John McCarthy, our producer Chris Lakin, and our entire crew, I'm Sean Wheelock. Thanks for listening, everyone. This has been a presentation of Ignotainment Media Network, online at ignotainment.com.
Let's Get It On with Big John McCarthy and Sean Wheelock, only on the Ignotainment Media Network. Don't forget to leave a rating and review in the comments section of the iTunes Podcast Store. If you have questions, comments, or are interested in sponsoring the show, contact us at info@letsgetitonpodcast.com, or check out our additional lineup of podcasts, including Ocho Man, Behind the Eight Ball, The Whiskey Philosopher, and Youth Baseball Talk at ignotainment.com.